I don't know why these people are really fighting. That's fine. But I think at its core, it bothers me because I can see a filmmaker saying, I'm trying to take an objective stance at this conflict that I won't even flesh out, but this is an objective stance of someone who had, I'm just painting as is. And I'm like, there is no such thing as that. Welcome back to Stacked, everybody. Episode
133.
133.
Shout out to Milo. Caught us out last week.
Dead.
Yeah. Gotta get those episode numbers right.
Whatever, man. I don't care. What's happening? It's good to see you two back on the show.
I know, it's been a while.
Where were
It's
you?
been a long time.
I had to go fight in the Civil War.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this Civil War going on,
Did you
right?
get drafted?
There's a pretty big
Civil War
going on
happening right now.
No, I didn't.
all across America.
Yeah.
Where's the first battle take place?
Where's
battle?
the first battle?
Where's
Where's
the
ground
first battle?
zero of Civil
There's
War?
already lore around the Civil War of Civil War.
Yeah.
I like it.
Guys, which faction would you say you align with the most?
Probably,
The Western forces.
yeah, probably them.
Well, we'll get into it, but
Yeah.
do they even make it they don't really make it very clear what each alliance?
they
I don't know what they all
imply
stand for. You can
Yeah.
kind of gauge a thing
Yeah.
or two, yeah.
And we could debate whether or not that's
A good thing.
a good thing or not.
Yeah, because we're going to be talking about the movie Civil War. It's a
Civil War.
hot button topic.
A24 Civil War.
A24.
Who
Highest-
directed this? Who
Alex
is it?
Garland.
Alex Garland, his last.
Supposedly.
announced.
Supposedly.
He's like,
Just announced.
I'm not quitting forever.
That's what he said?
Yeah.
Is that what he said?
He
in
said,
quote?
I'm just quitting for now.
I'm not quitting forever.
Not quitting. What's all this rubbish?
That-
I'm not quitting. It's rubbish.
Yeah, basically. That's what he said. He said, for now.
Why did a British guy make this? He doesn't know.
well, he's I think because the film takes such an objective stance, maybe it's good to have an outsider.
I
in it.
think so. I agree with that.
A British bloke.
Yeah.
A British bloke.
He's- It's
So you say a British bloke should call the shots then?
Isn't that derogatory? Bloke.
No.
No, it's just dude.
Nice
Bloke?
try.
Isn't that
I think he's
derogatory?
getting back at us for the years of torment upon Great Britain that the Americans have done.
On Great Britain.
No,
Poor Great
let's dive into
Britain.
this. Expand on that.
Well,
Were they the victims?
Revolutionary War,
Okay.
the War of 1812, of
All right.
course.
And you think those are all big losses
For them?
for you?
No.
For you personally.
But for them, yeah.
For them, yeah.
Yeah.
So does it make you happy that they're retaliating?
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
I'm going to make a movie called Revolutionary War. And it's like if Britain invaded the United States today.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Would you watch that?
I would watch that. That sounds
Yeah.
actually kind of cool.
What side would you be on? How many people would you kill in that
Whatever
war?
side has free pizza.
How many people would you shoot? How many people would you shoot in the face in that war?
Well, maybe we'll find out.
Okay.
Wow. That's what
Yeah.
we're getting into today.
Yeah, I guess.
Let's talk about this movie, shall we?
Yeah.
So to clarify, this movie's very divisive. Came out, reception has been split. To
Yeah.
say the least.
I thought the trailer looked pretty bad, and then the reviews came out and they were pretty good, and that got me more excited.
and then the actual movie came out to the general public.
And everybody was like,
It's like,
I
Some
hated
love,
that.
some hate.
yeah, it is very
And that's
divisive.
consistent with the 4 people on screen right now.
Yeah.
Because we are all very divided on this.
There's a bit of a faction
Generally,
right
yeah.
here.
Yep.
But right here, there's a civil war happening right on
I
your
feel like
right
it
on your
to
screen.
the most to like it to least. Like,
I honestly think yeah.
I think it is.
I think so.
I
I
think
think
so,
we've
yeah.
created a little spectrum here.
That's great.
Yeah, so Civil War follows. It takes place. He
Yeah, let's just start
describes it.
from-
So Alex Garland describes it as an indeterminable, sometime in the near future.
All right, Spielberg.
Indeterminable.
having never.
Like sometime in the near future, and America is at war with each other. There's all these factions. The movie doesn't necessarily explain how they got to that point. They don't really go into the backstory. And you could argue that's a creative choice, arguably. But it follows this team of journalists led by Kirsten Dunst. And they're just, really, it's a simple premise. They're just on a road trip to Washington, D.C. to interview the president.
Yep.
And it's about them having to deal with a war-torn America along the way and trying to, capture it. And, there's conflict with these characters because they have to stay objective. They can't get involved because they're there to capture the truth.
I think
And
they did the right thing.
the right thing.
Yeah.
So the right thing, you would argue, is to not do anything.
Exactly.
because that's what their job is.
Well, yes, but not objectively. I think what they should do as their objective, which is being objective rather than subjective, is not always what they do.
That's true. It's like clearly an internal struggle for these characters. I mean, you have Kirsten Dunst, and then you have Kaylee Spaney, who kind of plays this young, up-and-coming photojournalist who, idolizes her. And you could tell there's a difference between Kirsten Dunst, who's been in the game for a long time. She's seen a lot, and she's
Jaded.
And she's very jaded. Yeah, she's just numb to everything. And Kaylee Spaney comes into this movie, very wide-eyed, but then starts seeing some of these atrocities, and you see like the difference between someone who's fresh in the game just getting absolutely traumatized by, some of this horrific imagery that's happening around her. And then this other person who literally just, it almost feels like it doesn't affect them at all. And I think that's interesting. I think that's an interesting dynamic. But what did you guys feel about this? Because I know we have some, Chris, on our most anticipated movies of the year list, this was high. Nobody else really had this on their radar.
Funnily enough, Brandon, your experience with the trailers was reversed for me.
You love the trailers?
I thought the trailers were like, ooh, this is kind of neat. I like this idea. Oh God, where do I even begin with this? I like everything with like Kristen Dunst, Kaylee Spaney, the cast, and I think even though I'm on the far end of this side of the way I feel about this movie, I do think craft in terms of the craft and the performances were beautiful. I thought it was perfectly shot, very well composed. The performances were great. I really like Kaylee Spaney and Kristen Dunst in this.
Yeah.
So all of that was wonderful for me. Oh God, there's so much to dive into.
It's a heavy movie.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just start with the characters. So that stuff for me, like you said, Kristen Dunst and Kaylee Spaney, that kind of juxtaposition between them and their one being kind of at the onset of their career and the other being like more of a veteran, let's say. I thought that all worked very well. I bought that dynamic, and I bought the dynamic of the entire team, including like the two guys whose names are evading me. But the thing for me that didn't quite land was I couldn't get behind what the film was trying to articulate thematically, and like Joey, I read your review on Letterboxd about like the film kind of being this. It kind of it's like you took. I don't even know how to put this into words. You talk about how the film doesn't really take a subjective stance
it's
on
completely
anything.
Objective.
Yeah, and
by design.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. But like, I never really felt like by the end of the film, I never really felt like the movie said anything to me. And maybe I didn't. Maybe I just didn't. It didn't stick with me.
Well, you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
Because after the movie, I took out my phone and kind of went on Letterboxd. Because here's the thing. I went to this movie really with no expectations. I wasn't expecting to like it that much. Mm-hmm. But I was like surprised at how much I enjoyed it. And I went on Letterboxd. And it's not just you. A lot of people are like kind of bothered by that and frustrated by the fact that this movie almost doesn't really explicitly like say anything or have a stance. And I think it's because this movie's clearly inspired by these very highly politicized years that we've experienced recently, especially here in America. I can't speak for elsewhere, but obviously, like it takes place in America. It's about like America going against itself. So I'm using that as my context. And I think a lot of people are very passionate, rightfully so, about where our country's been heading and where things are at. Because it is frustrating. It's very frustrating, the position we've been in these past few years. And this movie clearly seems to be taking inspiration from that, but it's not coming at the angle that I think people are expecting, where I don't think Alex Garland, he wasn't going into this saying like, I'm here to make a stance on what is right or wrong. I think he's creating this emotion that I've been feeling, where I've just been feeling very numb to everything that's been happening these past few years, where I'm like so exhausted from the constant media frenzy, from just everything being like, just if you're not constantly paying attention, then you're part of the problem. Like there's that sentiment. And there's an image I'm going to bring up that I wrote in my Letterboxd review, where there's a scene where Kirsten Dunst is caught in this crossfire. They kind of come across these guys who are just shooting at each other. and she's just lying in the grass, and there's people shooting at each other in the background, but she just focuses in on this little flower in the grass. And like that image, I think kind of sums up what I think this movie was trying to capture, that feeling of like just being numb to like constant chaos around you all the time. So
you see that with the people that they see on the road trip, like throughout the war-torn America. Like some people like do their best to like avoid it and like stay out of it, as they say, right? Like there are people who just act like everything is normal, even though like it encroaches upon their freedom, you know, like the idea that's like sort of an allegory for like the Patriots Act, you know, impacting our freedoms by an unseen sort of protector, which is in the form of a federal power. But in this case, it's like two snipers on a roof, you know? Yeah. And then you can see that in the way like some families like operate at a abandoned football stadium, where they're like, oh, like we're a part of like this little society, and the kids like act as though like nothing's happened or that nothing's changed. You know, they built that little community. And then with people who are like directly involved with the war, it's like you see like an ultra passion behind it that you don't get an understanding of like their perspectives on anything, because the film isn't really interested in that, which I thought it would be. And I think the few times that it does is when it's like specifically focusing on the journalists, which is, I don't think, a thing that a lot of people are picking up on, because I think they view journalists as good, and journalists are great. But you got to admit that in the past few years, like with like spinning of news and stuff like that, it starts to get a little foggy in terms of like what's morally right for journalists to do.
Right. And we've seen like media outlets clearly have biases in these past few years, which is,
even if you agree with them,
right? Yeah, but it's inherently against the point of journalism, where your purpose is to document. Yeah, and then like Kirsten Dunst says in the movie, they capture the image and then let other people make the decision, and like that's tough. There's a lot of moral implications with that these characters really grapple with, but I think that's an interesting concept to explore. And for me personally, I think this movie explores it in a really compelling way.
Ethan, you've been quiet.
Yeah, you've been quiet. What's going on?
I've been letting people talk.
But I want to. Okay,
polite.
He's afraid of mumbling.
We've said some stuff. we've said some of our thoughts. Like, where are you at? Where are you standing with this film?
Well, this is where I'm at right now. Okay, so, when it comes to the sequences of depicting what war journalism is like, I think it's phenomenal. All the sequences of watching these characters enter the battlefield, having to navigate, like when they're just by a shootout at that one building between those guys and the other guys. You know?
Yeah, and there's like that exchange where it's like, what's going on here? It's like, there's a guy in there, he's shooting at us.
Yeah.
Like it's like so like just blunt and simple. Like there's no like explanation for what's happening. There's just two parties shooting at each other. Right.
And having the sort of dichotomy between Kaylee Spaney and Kristen Dunst is really nice, because like, you know, you sort of you get to watch Kaylee Spaney over the course of the film turn into Kristen Dunst, basically.
Yeah.
And then Kirsten Dunst.
And replace her.
Yeah.
By the time the film is over.
We could talk in this.
This is a spoiler discussion.
Yeah, spoiler discussion. So this
it's been out for a couple weeks.
We've all seen it.
But yeah, at the very end, Kirsten Dunst gets in the way of bullets to save Kaylee Spaney, but then dies herself. But of course, Kaylee Spaney takes the photos of her death.
But she's so desensitized, you know, to all the violence that it's like, oh, it doesn't really matter. It's like off her back. But she never even questions her. I think the difference between the two, and I wonder if you guys agree with this or not, is that Kirsten Dunst's character, I think, has a moral sort of like understanding of what to do with journalism, whereas I feel like Kaylee Spaney, as much as she is hardened by the war by this point, it's like, honestly, like she starts to, I think, lose sight of that and become sort of like a robot in the face of like this danger.
By the very end.
Like she puts people in danger, and she gets in the way. Like she literally gets in the way of like the soldiers trying to do their job.
She gets in a line of fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like she doesn't even have a reaction to the idea of somebody that she cared for, her hero, like shoot her.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy.
It's powerful.
I don't think a lot of people really latch on to that aspect of the story, and I'm very curious as to why that is.
Because I think the rest of the film, I don't agree that this film is apolitical. I think it tries to be, but just the inherent act of referencing what's been going on in our country right now, is taking it. I want us to scrub objective from all of our vocabularies when we talk about film.
No.
Can you guys promise me?
No.
The only things that are objective in life, measurements, numbers. That's objective.
Some people would
There's
disagree
no such
with
thing
that.
as an objective take. When you hold up and film something with the camera, the place that you're standing, the shot that you're getting, that is a subjective take on something. There's no such thing as objectivity in cinema.
He's mad.
I'm not mad.
I'm actually, I agree with Ethan on this.
I'm just saying I don't think that there's such a thing as taking an objective stance on something. I think Alex Garland, his subjective stance is that he thinks that he's doing that, where he's like, I'm a British bloke. I'm gonna just take a stance. I'd say that as joking, but like I just like using the word bloke. I am a British bloke, and I just want to like just capture this as it is. And I think him taking a stance of being apolitical is a political is a political stance in of itself, and I think a dangerous one. And I don't think that this type of story should have, like, this world should have been, I don't know. I just don't think it's appropriate to tell.
Appropriate.
I don't think it's appropriate because they should have just, like, why couldn't have this just been journalists in the real world, without this, like, this messy, like, hypothetical of, like, I would have honestly preferred if they delved more into the politics and, like, why, like, because the journalists, like, we don't know what the story these journalists are telling. We don't know what they're like.
But do we need to?
I think we need to because that's their job.
I don't think so. Because for me,
I don't need to know what their stance is on it. I just need to know what the story is.
The story is they want to interview the president. And the president...
I know, but why?
Because it's implied. It's implied about him airstriking American civilians and
But
being
why?
a third-term president and being an FBI, disbanding the FBI and stuff like that. And I think... basically, it's a really interesting idea to have somebody go, okay, so this is like a fascistic like ideology, and let's confront it. That's what journalism is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I think it does make sense to be like, okay, we're gonna thinly veil it because you say it's a dangerous story or to tell, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's even more dangerous to have if you're making a story about the same thing, disregard like journalists in real world, like if you take a stance on something like that, I feel like you give off the wrong impression because you're gonna have one side of your audience go, oh, I don't want to go see this movie because it's pointing at something and saying like this is wrong, which is you could argue, hey, like why invite the others into the discussion, but it makes for a compelling sort of like dissection between the two.
I don't know. I don't think people should make art be like, oh, but I need to let these guys be okay with this too.
I think you bring up a really interesting point about objectivity, which I appreciate that. Thank you. Like I didn't think about that way. I think like maybe I don't know. I saw it as just like a film about like becoming numb to just like having media at your fingertips all the time. Like these characters, it follows these photojournalists where at all times they're just in the thick of it.
And I don't disagree with that. Like I do appreciate that. Like we're telling the story. But the context in which that narrative is being presented to us, I just think is very like muddled. Do
you think it would have been equally as impactful for a lot of viewers to have a movie where it would be like just journalists on the ground in places like in real wars that are happening? Yeah.
I think it would have.
Set in a real
Absolutely.
world setting.
You'd mentioned this in your review that you felt like this film was a lot like the movie Come and See.
Yeah.
And I disagreed with that because while yes, it is characters like sort of going on like this trip and they're facing through all like this atrocities of war, you know. I feel like Come and See is more impactful because like that one's actually history, and this character could have existed. Whereas these are characters made up in a fantasy of a very messy political stance. You know, where it, like, imagine if we had like a reporter like in the Middle East during like the Bush era when we were like invading, you know, and we could talk about like all the numbness of that and like what is the point of that journalist being there? What's the point of like that's a completely different movie, I know. Like, no, you should never critique a film being like, well, it should be something completely different.
Right.
I'm just saying I understand. I get what Alex Garland was trying to get at, but like I just think his execution was messy because of him trying to make up this fake war that's not really a fake war. That's like him saying, "Oh no, I'm apolitical," but it's also that not really.
But also
You
being in the U.S. and especially in like where it's like all below the surface, it seems like there are moments where it boils, like with these like protests and police like beating up citizens, or with January 6th, you know, there are things like that where it's obviously an allusion to these like discontents in our society. But I think it makes it even more impactful to show audiences like the hypothetical. You don't have to do that. Like, I agree that you could make a good journalism movie to desensitize, but to have it hit home for Americans who keep their head in the sand all the time, like, that's like our stance on war for the most part, is either to keep our head in the sand until somebody does something to us, or until like our resources are affected, or like our own like self-interest. And once that happens, that's when America tends to like
that's when
go in on people. And that it's interesting to see that from an outside, like from an inside perspective as opposed to an outside perspective. And that's why I think like, it's impactful.
Maybe that might be a reason why I didn't connect with the movie as someone who is not American.
Yeah, and they had their little character.
Yeah, there was I'll talk about that in a minute. But
Oh yeah, you got fucked in this movie, bro.
I got a bit. That did get a laugh out of me. I won't lie.
Yeah,
but we'll come back to that. Yeah, but like I suppose maybe for me as someone who's not from the States, when I heard about this movie and like like a civil war, another civil war in America in the modern day, with all the and like as someone who's kind of like, even though I've been in the States for the last few years, I'm like pretty politically detached from the U.S. Like, even though I have my leanings, but like I don't vote or anything like that, and I can't. So yeah, so when I heard about this, I was like, there's so much complexity you can dive into in terms of America's political divide, or like the nature of journalism and how it reshapes truth within the media, and that's a pretty hot button topic in the U.S., especially nowadays. But then, yeah, like you guys said, we're treated to this story that kind of distills itself into the plight of these journalists going about this journey. It's effectively a road trip story. And then by the end, when it's all said and done, I wasn't even sure what they were trying to say beyond what Joey pointed out about the kind of media frenzy and how that kind of numbs people to like just like all the chaos of the world. And I don't know. I guess like maybe I went in with like a preconceived notion of what this movie was gonna be, which I guess what might be my fault on its own. But I
don't think you were alone though.
You're not alone.
No.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're not alone.
And I think maybe for me the key thing was that, okay, I can distance myself from like the expectations of like it having this like really complex story where they explore all the motivations of the factions and all this stuff. You know, if this movie could have been like another 2 hours long, and if it really wanted to explore what the influence of the Western forces and the United States and then the Maoists,
Like
apparently.
Once again, there's a lot of politics
all
in
this
this
stuff,
movie
yeah.
that is not
And it's just
explicitly
tossed
said,
out.
Yeah. And like
It's
they dish out little
and
details.
I think for some people that's an issue, but for others, I would say for myself, I didn't feel like I missed it.
Maybe that's
For me
the word
personally.
we should use instead of objective here, is explicit.
Explicit.
Like, if
Can
it,
you-
is it outwardly, like, is it clearly and outwardly stated, or is it kind of
implied an implication.
That's true because I feel like
because it does
depending
both.
on who watches this movie, they will read the situation differently.
Well, because
And I think
everybody
that's
has
interesting.
everybody has a different perception of U.S. politics.
Yeah.
Even people internationally. So their interpretation of what goes on in the movie is going to be different based on that.
Yeah.
Which is their subjective viewpoint. But what it's getting at is like thematically, I think more. And this is, if I offend you, I'm sorry, Ethan. Objective.
What the? There's no such thing.
Thematic objectivity.
There's no such thing
I
as
think,
thematic
but
objectivity.
I think
There's no such thing.
In terms of what it's saying,
I
No.
guess like the human.
it's pretty
I think-
clear.
No, I think Ethan does bring up a good point where it's like the subjectivity is just inherent in the human experience. I think you're arguing it's impossible for a human to be objective because you have your own specific
it's
viewpoint.
like literally like
Math.
it is objective that this table is a certain length. You will never argue with me that this table. What do you think? This table is probably like 5. No,
Right.
not 5 feet. Jesus.
Oh, so it is subjective.
It is subjective. No, I think it's more like 4 feet.
I don't know. I'm bad at eyeballing, but this table has a measurement, and if we measured it, we'd all be like, "That's that measurement, right?" We'd all
What
be
if
like,
you
"Yes,
don't
yes."
use the metric system? Does that change?
Yeah, no, it
because
doesn't
it's
matter.
still the same distance.
It's the same ratio.
It's just with different labels. That's like saying that's a rock. Oh no, in French, I mean that's also
Well,
a
it's
rock.
technically not a rock.
It's a piece of cement.
Yes.
But cement, there's other languages for cement, Anyways, what I'm trying to say is we need to use objective for things that are measurable and easily definable. I think the only thing that you can say that are objective in film are the type of shots they use.
Mediums.
Just saying this is a wide. They use this color. That's objective. But you can't say that.
So you say with the frame, as far as their coloring and stuff like that, not the meaning behind it, but
That's
the things that are
color temperature.
the things
is
that are
objective.
literally tangible.
Yeah.
Objective is served for things that are tangible.
Okay.
And then so you can't say a theme is objective, because. Hell, we don't know. What if Alex Garland could just come and be like, actually, no, I meant this movie to be completely different.
Yeah.
You were just fell for the wrong thing. So then would we call his definition the objective narrative?
Well, that gets into the auteur theory, which we're not.
Exactly. But exactly. Going into that, there's no such thing as objectivity in any art form. Any art form. And I just need to say that right now.
He's mad.
And I'm not mad.
He's
I
passionate.
see
He's
people
passionate.
on the internet.
He sees me
saying,
say
this-
objective.
No,
He saw
no.
my letterbox review where I used the word objective.
It's okay,
No.
man.
And he got mad.
I got mad.
He got mad. He overcharged me for my Panda Express today.
I
Didn't you?
did. I did by $12.
Yeah. No wonder my
What the hell?
or chicken
My
rice
orange
plate
chicken
was
plate was
$23. He was mad at me.
It's an objective price.
It's an objective.
It is measurable.
No, but it is measurable. It's numbers. Yeah. But I see people on the internet. This goes past even Civil War or politics or anything, where people are like, "What is objectively the worst movie ever made?" And they're like, "Batman and Robin is objectively the."
Do people say that on Twitter?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Some movies they're like, "No, this movie's objectively bad." If you like this movie, you are what do they think of people who like something that they think is objectively bad? You are an affront to nature. You defy laws and physics because this is objective that Batman vs Superman is a masterpiece. This is objectively good, and if you don't like this movie, you're a freak of nature. You defy physics,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you think?
No.
When people disagree with you?
No.
I just
Well, how about this? Is it fair to say that, whether it's just inherently subjective or not, a filmmaker's approach can attempt to emulate the idea of objectivity, almost as if a camera was just placed randomly one day.
He says
left
he
rolling,
tries.
and then they walked away.
even that is a choice that the director made.
Well, yeah, no, I know,
Yeah.
I understand that's
Yeah.
still subjective what the director is doing, but is it?
Of
Can you make
capturing
a
it.
subjective choice to be objective?
you can make an attempt to be
I
objective.
mean,
Yeah, an attempt, and I think
yeah,
that's where
and
I'm at
but
with this film.
you can make an attempt, but it will never be successful.
Well, I
which is
think
why I don't think I like this film.
I think the individuals driving the film give it that perspective, right? That subjective perspective, rather than just like random subjects like walking down the street. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's where it's like I can understand your perspective, especially with some of the line readings and stuff. Like there's lines in here where I'm like, there's a few where I'm like, oh, liberal Hollywood at it again, even as somebody who like shares similar ideologies to liberal Hollywood.
Goddamn liberal.
I mean,
the scene where
let's-
Wagner is driving and he's like, did we just travel in the time portal? And then
he
then
does. We're in
Kaylee
the
Spaney's like the
Twilight
Twilight Zone, and I'm like, oh my god.
Let's say like the Adam McKay version of this movie would look very different.
And worse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and worse.
But even though I think someone trying to say I'm gonna take an objective stance on this, and I think that's arrogant.
Do you think
I think it's arrogant to say like I'm gonna try to do this objectively, because that is impossible.
so? Where you guys find it less compelling as a movie
Yeah.
is when it's not defining the world it's in.
No, it bothers me that I can tell that it's trying to say that it's taking an objective stance, which I disagree with fundamentally, which is why I didn't enjoy
and
this film.
that's like the core.
I think that is the
nugget.
core. Like, I think it's weird that like they're like none of the world building is like touched on or anything, or like I'm like always confused, like who, like I don't know why these people are really fighting. That's fine, but I think at its core it bothers me because I can see a filmmaker saying I'm trying to take an objective stance at this conflict that I won't even flesh out, but this is an objective stance of someone who like had, I'm just like painting as is, and I'm like, there is no such thing as that. That you can't give me any piece of news, photography, movies, media.
But war is bad.
War is bad, yes, but that's even then like that you can't say that objectively, and I'm not saying like I'm not being myself in the war movies episode where I'm like I love war, I hate war, and I think war should never happen. But it is still an opinion, nonetheless. And I'm not saying like, I'm trying to like.
Oh man.
I know I'm trying to like
He's-
cover all my bases here, because these are some murky waters that I'm walking through a minefield right now, and I know this, and I just want you all to be sure. Like, I do think war is bad, and I think and
No. I don't think that's what I got from your
Yeah.
spiel.
Chris
at all.
agrees
except
with
for
you. and
if
he's-
it,
I think
except for if it's like a like really cool looking. Like I love really cool looking wars
Oh,
where
I
there's
wasn't
like
gonna go there.
lots of no. I like when there's lots of deaths and explosions. Like that is like the coolest stuff.
I can't tell.
And
if
I
he's
wanna-
doing
Chris,
it.
what were you gonna say? You totally cut him off, man.
No,
To
I was
make
still
a-
talking. I was still talking, and I just had to finish my point.
That you like cool wars.
I love
Got it.
wars.
That is the
I love-
that is the clip we'll be sharing.
I
on
love
TikTok.
wars. Edit a
Um,
gun in my hand. I will kill you.
We're just gonna edit. We're just gonna everything else you say. I'm gonna cut out except for that.
I love wars. I love death, and I love killing.
Okay, but Chris, what were you
He's
gonna
just
say?
like Jesse
Well,
Plemons.
what I was gonna say kind of builds off what Ethan was saying about in terms of like, yeah, war is terrible, and like I don't know anyone who would actively endorse war. Actually, well then again, there are some people who would endorse war. But like, there are reasons that conflict happen around
Sure.
the world, and
Yeah.
like for conflict to happen, something else has to be happening to motivate it, and that's why war happens.
Yeah.
And because people feel oppressed or what have you, repressed, what have you. But yeah, like Brandon, you were asking Ethan and I, like, at what points did this movie like work for us and not work for us? And for me, kind of like Ethan, the world not being like sparse details being sprinkled throughout the film about like what is the conflict here. That's fine by me. I'm okay that there's not like it's not like a 4-hour movie and I'm given all of the exposition in the beginning.
Right.
But the thing for me is that by the end of the film, and I think I've said this already, but
Yeah. You just didn't
There was,
know
like-
what
what am I supposed
What
to
are you
take?
supposed to take away?
Yeah.
What do you take away personally?
Did you,
If I'm being
anything
honest,
at all?
journalism's hard.
Yeah,
And
it's
that-
tough.
and-
Which is yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Absolutely true. That shit sucks. I would never want to be that. But
yeah.
like with such a concept at its hand, I didn't feel like I didn't feel like Garland was able to cultivate much of anything other than your explanation about that numbness that you feel after being overwhelmed by this for so long.
Yeah, I mean-
and the characters work so well for that, which is
yeah.
why
Yeah,
I
it's fascinating.
this is what that, and I don't hate. We should clarify, Ethan. I don't hate.
I think this movie's okay. I give 3 stars on Letterboxd.
I give
Like
it
I
2,
don't
but-
hate this movie whatsoever. I think it's okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. It's
All right.
It's not my least favorite Garland movie.
What's your least favorite?
Men.
I didn't like.
Oh,
Men.
man, I didn't even watch.
I like Men.
But
I
you
like
like
Men too.
It's
Don't clip that out.
it's his worst movie in my opinion. But
I think I'm like listening to
think
what you
Men's
guys are
great.
saying, and like here's the thing. I think everyone here has a very unique perspective, and that's what I love about this movie. I think it
No,
is-
I
think
love
the
it's
discourse.
drawing.
The discourse is great.
It is drawing a really fascinating discourse, and I think the reason this movie worked for me, and this is subjective, but I think it played into I think a movie can succeed not necessarily on like exploring a specific theme, but maybe like capturing a specific emotion. And I think that's where I connected with this film. I remember when the January 6th insurrection happened. And by that point, I remember watching it on the TV almost with a similar what's the word? Like almost with like a similar manner that like Kirsten Dunst witnesses a lot of the things in this movie, which just
Let's all do her
complete-
face.
Can that be our thumbnail?
Yeah, we're gonna do a photo shoot after, and we all just go.
But I don't know where you guys were at watching the news if you were watching
I was
on that day.
I was
Oh, I was.
I was glued to my TV.
I was
And that's-
watching
You tweeted it was 9/11 too.
Yeah,
9/11 too.
I stand by it. I stand by that.
Apples and oranges. But I just remember by that point, after going through 2020, and there were all the protests in that summer, there was all the stuff with COVID.
This is 2020
and
coded.
how that well, I think this movie's very clearly inspired by those events.
Yeah.
Like very obviously inspired.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm bringing it up. And I think where I resonated with the idea of like witnessing this and feeling that coldness, that almost that separation between reality and then the screen that's in front of you.
I would say it's like uncertainty and like a fear driving it, because as like somebody who lives in this country, and I'm assuming if you made it in another country and you're from that country, you'd feel the same way. It's that uncertainty and fear of like what to do, you know, in the face of chaos of war, which is more of where I was going with my come and see sort of reference.
I was just about to say, like, I feel that emotion that you're talking about through Come and See.
Which you don't feel during Civil War.
No.
You feel like
Because Come and See is like, oh my God, that.
And is Come and See, I haven't seen Come and See, but is it rooted in reality? Like
It's World War.
well, there are
There's some
surrealistic
There's some surreal
aspects.
stuff, but yeah.
Okay,
It's
surrealist,
surreal,
but the background
it's
is
depicting
a real...
It's
a
war.
historical event.
It's
Yeah.
more
Okay.
psychological
And-
than it is like hypothetical, political.
Or-
here's
Here's
okay,
a great
continue.
comparison: the Human Condition trilogy.
I love those
Oh,
movies.
man.
Great
But-
movies.
And that's 3 movies of just like the most insane like intention.
But it's
and
so
then
real.
By the end of the 3rd film, you just see this like husk of a man, you know.
Yeah, he's not the person he was in
Yeah,
the
he's
first
not
film.
there.
And it's just like that's the kind of stuff that gets me going. Like, not gets me going. What the fuck?
Well,
That
Ethan is
like that
pro-war.
fascinates me. That fascinates me is when it's stuff like that. And I could give more examples of like fictional movies, more like fantastical films like that.
Yeah,
like,
what's another example of a movie that maybe almost like creates like a hypothetical history, whether that's in the past or something in the
You
near
ever heard of
future,
Olympus Has Fallen?
or White
Is
House
that-
Down, like hypothetical attacks on like the Capitol? But I don't know. Is there any other
Red Dawn?
examples?
Yeah,
Red Dawn, yeah.
that's good. Both
That
of
was
them.
right in the middle of the Red Scare in
Yeah.
the 80s. But what do you guys think was Garland's intention with kind of creating this like hypothetical war?
To show that glorification of violence, and I think speak to people in the West especially, to like the negative ideals of fascism, because you've seen I know it's not trying, like you said, to like objectively make a point, or subjectively make a point, but it is, like you're saying. You're right about that. But I think it's very compelling, the message it's saying about fascism and like how quickly we are to like fall to that violence, and to that easy rule. Some people are willing to like just kick back and be like, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And then some people are like actively fighting against it, and it shows that it's awful regardless of what happens.
I think the film also captures, for me, the sentiment of like our country's divide.
Journalism falling apart.
I just know, like, for example, we have a rule in our family where we can't talk about politics at the dinner table openly. And like, if you
It's
think
an
about
unspoken rule in my house.
yeah, and if
Do
you
it.
think about that, this shouldn't be stuff that like divides people, where it's like you can't associate with someone else based on their own political ideology. Yet we are at a point where like we have to.
It's because
And I think the movie captures
is informed
that.
by your values.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
Your
and
sphere of
it conflicts
influence.
with other people's values, and usually that's not pleasant.
yeah, but like you can't. It's almost like some people can't even get past a conversation stage where they can at least attempt to
Speak
hear,
as humans.
Yeah.
to speak as humans and try to hear someone else's perspective and try to empathize, whether or not you agree. No one's saying you have to agree.
Yeah.
But I think because of that, you're not creating meaningful conversations. You're having two sides essentially yelling at each other, but both sides are so caught up in their own cognitive dissonance that there's no progress that can happen. There's no mutual understanding that can come from that.
They do that in the background of this movie.
I agree. I think
The president over the radio.
yes, it's always muddled.
Yeah, and it's
It's
like
always muddled.
it's muddled, and he's saying, "Oh, like they're denying the peace summits because they don't want like this." And then in another thing, he'll say the completely opposite thing: "We're open to a peace summit whenever there's like time or whenever you guys want to make the effort." And it's like that contradictory perspective
Yeah.
that is like that it points out the hypocrisy like of the whole thing.
I kind of see what you're saying with that. The like when you were talking about like cognitive dissonance and all that, Joey, with like how eventually if two people just can't even sit in a room together and talk, it's just yapping and nothing gets done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that makes me think about like not only of course the state of the United States, but practically any other place where there's political tension going on right now.
Oh, it is not isolated to America.
No,
at all.
this is
This is a worldwide
yeah,
issue.
this is everywhere, and like I have my own stuff.
Yeah.
Hong
Yeah.
Kong, that's a whole other
Absolutely.
thing. But like, yeah, and I felt the same way where it's like, at a certain point, it's like, if no one's gonna meet at the table, it's just chaos and it's just yelling, and it sucks that it comes to that. But like the thing that I guess frustrates me with the movie is that I love that observation. I think that's a really important statement to make about the condition of our world and the way in which we resolve conflict and the way conflict is currently going. But by the end, it doesn't make us. It doesn't feel like it makes a statement on it.
It feels like half a statement.
It feels like
It feels like you're like Alex Garland's like, oh, like
this is rough.
this is rough, and I'm like, okay, let's say why. I feel like that. I know the film does talk about ethics within journalists.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the reason why that like people in our country like can't even, like you said, talk to each other. Like there has to be no politics at the dinner table rules.
Yes, sir.
Is because the media themselves, they weaponize, your values.
Yeah, they do.
And why do they do that? Capitalism. Because if they make it more intense, people get scared. They'll tune in to their show more.
Yeah.
There is no sort of like capitalist critique, and I think that is like so fundamental to like everything that's wrong in our country right now
And in the world.
and in the world. Yes,
He
capitalism.
doesn't have to worry about it. He's British.
Exactly. Bloke. He's a bloke. See.
Which isn't derogatory. It's just a guy. So
It's
you're
just-
saying he's just
he's
a
a
guy.
dude.
Yeah,
He's a guy.
He's just a guy.
He's
but
just a
British
guy,
guy.
He's
which
just
is
a
true.
bloke. Yeah.
That's objective. He's a guy.
Yeah.
That's a bit.
Actually, that not according to gender theory. We don't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm not gonna assume anything about this man.
Let's get into that. No,
Let's get into it.
no, I agree with that. I agree that there's obviously like more that could have been diving into. I think maybe where it just succeeded for me was I think it captures the emotion for me. I found myself, feeling. I felt what Alex Garland was trying to capture.
No, yeah. I think
it worked
great.
for me.
Yeah.
It really seems to just come down to like, did you connect with what was there, or did you long for something that, at least I suppose for me and Ethan, would take advantage of its high concept ideas.
We weren't moved because I don't want to speak for you, but for me personally, like I didn't feel like his analysis was nuanced in any way.
No, I would agree with that.
I don't think there was any nuance to it.
I think there's more nuance to things that weren't political, ironically enough.
Honestly, I see that.
Where
And
like
maybe
the
that's
subjective
where
experience
I'm
of the
like coming
journalists.
at it like more. Like I think maybe like I went into it expecting more of a political discussion.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what I pulled from it. I thought it was a very like it kind of focused on the more human aspects of these situations. And a movie that's actually I want to comp, and it's kind of a different movie entirely, but it explores a similar theme, is Nightcrawler with Jake.
Yes.
Is it
Now-
okay? Is it Gyllenhaal or Gyllenhaal? I'm sorry,
Gyllenhaal.
Jake Gyllenhaal
Oh.
movie. For those of you who
Great
don't know,
comp. Great comp.
Nightcrawler. It's a movie about this guy, kind of crazy dude, lives in L.A.
Yeah.
And he gets a gig filming crime scenes and then selling that footage to news outlets who are covering it. And he tends to overstep the boundary of like where he starts to get involved in order to get the coverage he wants. And I think this movie captures almost a similar feeling in terms of like these characters are gonna capture the image they need to get in order to tell their story. Even if that means like, for instance, like there's this image of like Kristen Dunst is just watching this guy set on fire with like he's trapped in a tire and he's set on fire. And it's a really powerful image, but it makes the argument. And okay, there's a side tangent, but I found myself getting excited when these characters got a good shot because they would they would intercut with the images
image
they
that they
got.
got.
Yeah.
Did they
and when
take
I'm like,
those?
oh, that's a good one. That's the one that
They
they
probably
should
took them
sell.
on set.
But then it made me reflect and say like, but like they're capturing these atrocities and not doing anything about it.
But do they have to?
But that's
Which they
and
do.
that's the
that's the-
argument.
is
That's
the
the
moral-
argument.
that's
But
the
like
moral integrity
you
of
see that in
journalism.
Kaylee Spaney's character of like at the very beginning where she's just like she's so affected by this stuff, but then you see Kristen Dunst and she's almost trained
Stone cold,
herself
yeah.
to just not let it affect you, not let it get into your head at all.
I don't need them to take a stance on anything. I think it would be just as, if not a little bit more compelling if they did, but I don't think I needed that. Because with the story it sets out for the audience, you get what Garland, I think, was trying to do. Not that, like, I have a right to say that necessarily, or that anybody really has the right to say objectively what a movie is about. Come a long way.
We have come a long way in this past 50 minutes. I'm proud of you guys.
But I think it's interesting. Nonetheless, because regardless if you hate this movie or if you love this movie or you're somewhat indifferent about the movie,
okay.
then I think there's going to be a lot to pull from it, regardless, whether or not you like it or not.
I do think that. I always appreciate when a movie, gets the gears turning.
Yeah.
It makes me like reflect. And like even if and here's the thing, I'm on the positive side of this film, but there's definitely like some things that I found to be like I found the screenwriting to be like pretty lackluster at times. Like they try to have these like interpersonal. I think they're trying to create like almost like a mentor relationship between Kirsten Dunst and Kaylee Spaney that came across super inorganic and not natural.
I bought it like once or twice.
But it just those interpersonal like they did not talk like people at all in those moments. So there's definitely areas where this film is lacking. I don't think it's a perfect film by any means. However, I think it's saying something really interesting and worth like a very valuable discussion, and I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah. I feel like I said, I feel like this movie made half like a statement. Whereas I think Nightcrawler is a fantastic comp because I feel like that completes the statement that I feel like Alex Garland was trying to do, where it's like, oh, we have this guy, he's being morally corrupt because he wants to make money, he wants to be a success, he needs to be the best.
That's true. The
He
characters
needs to
in
take
this
out his
are-
competitors.
The characters in this are like, other than just them doing their job, they are rather like unambitious.
No, yeah.
In the
Well, it's
sense.
their
And-
motivation other than to tell the story because
Exactly.
it's not. I thought they were going to do something with Wagner Moore's character because he's like the most aggressively political, I would say, of the bunch.
Yeah.
But they never did.
That is true. He's a character because he's not a photojournalist. He's just a journalist.
He's a
and he's trying to
writer.
get a story, but they never explain.
And he's like the
what
older
the
and
story
wiser
is,
one.
and like or like what?
Oh wait, wrong character, right?
Wait, which one? Wait, which one? are
The
you
one who
talking
works for the New York Times, right?
No.
about? No, the one who smokes the cigarettes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know his name.
Stephen McKinley Henderson.
And see, that's the thing. I don't know. I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know
the
those
old
characters.
guy.
I don't know
I
those
loved
characters'
him.
names. We
Loved
don't really get to like
Joe.
really, you know.
I agree, and usually I have issue with that if a movie fails for me to like pull any discernible qualities from certain characters. But I think in this instance it worked for me because it played into that like the coldness, the apathy of like what these characters feel, where like almost they're like stripped of their humanity by doing this job. And I think that's
I would agree
interesting.
with you, but then there's multiple scenes in this film where Garland's trying to show their humanity by having them like connect with each other.
That's true.
the
you know,
dress
I
shop
wonder why,
scene.
yeah, I wonder why that doesn't bother
I
me.
feel.
Me too. Just kidding.
It didn't, but I no, but
Steve
I,
Starkey.
you,
But yeah.
you ever like agree with a critique, but then it's like, but I don't know why that like didn't like pull me out.
And I think that's fair. I think
Yeah.
that's a fair thing because, like, yeah, if someone will say something about a movie I really love, like, I don't know, give me a critique of The Phantom Menace.
It's boring.
It's boring. Yeah, it actually kind of is sometimes, but
I like it.
I still
I
love
like
it.
the
Yeah,
politics.
it's still like
that's the thing,
It's still
like,
a 5-star movie.
I could probably agree. I agree with like most of what
Yeah.
you're saying, but like I don't know. I think it tapped into a certain emotion I've been having these past few years, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Blu-ray rating.
Blu-ray ratings out of 5.
There's no such thing.
Got a heart. It got a
No,
heart.
you
I do
signed
like
you
it.
signed a contract with this show. That means you have
Yeah,
to give.
I'm getting paid.
I don't care about your letterbox. You can rate stars, but with this show, you give out fucking Blu-ray ratings. All right, you hear me?
Yeah,
You hear me?
yeah.
Let's go. Since we'll just go up, you know, just like the rating curve. So you start. How many Blu-rays?
2 Blu-rays.
2 Blu-rays. I'm gonna give it 3. Oh wait. It's out of 10, right?
Oh,
No, it's out of 5.
Out of 5.
There's too many Blu-rays.
Oh yeah, that's too many Blu-rays. I mean, but look how many we have.
Yeah, we have a lot.
You won't have any room.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. I'm running out. Okay, so 2 Blu-rays. I'm gonna give it 3. 3 little Blu-rays. It's okay. It's not. I don't think it's a bad film. Like I said, there's like really good sequences in this film, and I do love. I mean, I took journalism classes in college. You know, I feel for journalism and like trying to tell the story. You know, and like the like the feats that people have to go through to just tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not an objective story. Okay, no news is objective, but
Exactly.
just it was. I'm glad that there's a film like that. Just everything else, I don't feel was as nuanced as that particular aspect, which is
Okay.
why I think it's okay.
Gotcha. Well, I think the film captured something really unique and interesting, and I like when films now. I don't think this worked for you guys, but for me, I always love a film that feels like it captures the sentiment of the times that they're made in. And for me, at least where I'm at, how I feel currently about the world around me and especially our country, I think this movie captured the sentiment of where I'm at with it. And for that reason, I'm going to give it 4.5. And I'll actually say that this is my favorite movie of the year so far.
Wow.
Whoa.
More than Dune 2.
Eh.
Damn.
Joey hates Dune.
That's crazy. I can't say how this film will age, but living through the time does present like a standard bias, I think, because I feel like you're more connected to it in the moment, especially since you live through important historical events. And like Joey, I feel like it expertly captures like being in that, even if it's not the Civil War hypothetically depicted via the film. And I actually think that's a very compelling way to tell this story. And I was really excited before I saw the trailer, and then after I saw it, I wasn't. And then when the reviews came out, I was again. So it's like it kind of went back and forth on it.
Yeah.
But now I'm gonna be with Joey on that 4.5 Blu-ray mark.
Yeah.
It's great.
You know, another interesting thing about this movie I realized is that they never like depict social media.
Yeah, that
way.
is.
Yeah.
The girl was on her phone once.
Yeah, they don't depict social media, and they don't even like show specific news outlets. I think they only reference once who they work for.
Yeah.
And I found that to be interesting, and I think erasing those like logos, like you were saying in terms of how it's going to age, I was thinking while watching this, like if anything, I think that's going to help its longevity because years down the road when everything inevitably changes, because that's how the internet works.
Yeah.
I think this film will still be applicable to like wherever we're at.
Unfortunately.
It will be interesting to
Decades
see
down the road.
how
I'm
this
curious
film
how this will
ages.
age.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially with who wins this year.
Yeah.
Who wins what?
The playoffs.
Did you not know?
Playoffs? What? What did I
There's
not
like
know?
a huge election going on.
Wait. Yeah, you know.
No, you know,
let's stay
Stack
out of that.
Podcast. Yeah, we try to stay out of
Oh,
that
sorry.
stuff.
I forgot that we have an
What did she
election that
say?
we have to do this year. For, you know, us American folk.
Not
I
me.
can't wait.
Yeah, you're so excited.
The old geezers.
Let the fogies fight. I think this should be the first election where we have to have them fight, and whoever wins gets the presidency.
And with that,
Wait, yeah.
And you know where they should fight? Caesar's Palace, right in the Colosseum. And I get to eat like junk food. Kick him in the ass, Sleepy Joe. Down my box wine. Oh, this is great. I'm gonna go blow $200 at the slot machines now. That's what I'm gonna do.
That's
Anyways,
I want to see that movie.
yeah, Idiocracy.
Oh,
Now that's a good movie. That's like shows how stupid.
Hypothetical.
That's a good hypothetical. It shows how stupid we're all becoming.
Yeah.
And you know, I think this movie is of the times because it is of a filmmaker who thinks he can be objective, and that's a very of the time things. When I think,
Well,
when,
we don't know if he thinks that.
No,
Like, that's
I know,
just
he
maybe how
told
some
me.
people read it.
yeah, no, I read it. Like
You don't
that.
know that. He could come out and say like, "No, I had a stance," like,
Exactly.
because you know he's a British bloke.
He is a oh boy, he's a bloke.
He's a guy.
He's a
British
bloke.
guy.
He's a bloke. You're right. You're so right. But like, I don't know. How I read it is like, this guy thinks he can be objective about this.
Well, that's assuming something about like the director's intent that could or could not be true.
Well,
not
that's how I
verified.
read
Then
the
that's
film.
subjective.
Exactly.
That's
See, you're
subjective.
getting it. Let's go.
And that's-
Getting what? Okay.
and
No,
that's
you
why
always-
this
you
is.
always got it.
And this is why it's a masterpiece, folks.
A masterpiece.
A
Okay.
masterpiece.
I don't know.
It's
about
not a
that, but
masterpiece.
It's a good movie for me.
It's an interesting movie.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Well,
Good.
I think that'll do it for our little discussion
That'll
today.
do it.
Yeah.
You know, there's very few films that I feel like we can spark like a near hour discussion about. Like usually our cozy reviews are only like 10 minutes, but I'll give the film that. You know,
We
This
were
isn't
able
a
to-
cozy movie.
it's not a cozy movie.
Not a cozy movie.
We were not in any blankets for this one, even though we were gonna be in blankets for this one. We wanted to do sick day movies, and we wanted to bundle up in blankets and drink hot cocoa. But
'Cause
maybe we'll
Joey-
do that later.
Joey's
We'll
been
see.
sick too much lately.
Yeah,
Oh, just last week.
lately a lot. It's been a lot.
Come on, man.
Anyways, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening.
Put your Civil War
Um,
comments down below. Start
yeah.
a Civil War.
Honestly,
Start a
start
Civil War in the
What
comments.
side would you be on in the Civil War?
What side?
Anybody who chooses the Western forces, awesome.
How would you know? They
All
don't
right.
define what
Yeah.
that means.
No, Alex Garland told Brandon.
He told
everything.
me.
Yeah, they're.
I
He
have,
gave Brandon the lore book, and he went, "Oh."
and that's why I love it so much.
He went, "What the?" All right, let's end this show. Let's clap to end it.